What if one message could destroy the life you spent years trying to protect? Eleanor thought she had escaped her past, until the photo of her baby reached the wrong man, a billionaire she once loved, a man she feared more than anyone, and the father who never knew his son existed. Now he's hunting for the truth, and nothing, not time, not distance, not her fear, can stop him. But when he finally finds her, the real danger begins. May peace fill your home, may blessings follow your steps, and may every hardship in your life turn into ease. Amen. Where are you listening to me from today, family? Stay with me. Don't skip a single moment, because this story is worth every second. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It truly supports us now. Let's dive into today's story. Elena sat on the edge of the worn sofa, cradling Leo in her arms, the soft warmth of his tiny body pressing against her chest. He was restless, cooing and reaching for her face with little fingers that seemed impossibly delicate. She watched his brown eyes sparkle with curiosity and innocence, and a smile tugged at her lips despite the tension that had built up all week. Life had become a careful balancing act. Work, bills, sleepless nights, and the constant vigilance that came with raising a child alone. But moments like this reminded her why she endured everything. Gently, she lifted her phone, her thumb hovering over the camera icon. A soft click captured Leo mid-gurgle, his tiny hand brushing against her chin. She intended to send the photo to her best friend, Sarah, someone who had been her lifeline through the long nights of crying babies and the moments of despair that came when the world felt too heavy. Her finger swiped to open the messaging app, and for a brief second, the world seemed calm, ordinary, normal. Then the slip happened. One careless movement, one tiny miscalculation, and the message went to the wrong contact. Her chest tightened, but she didn't notice immediately. It wasn't until the reply flashed on her screen that her heart threatened to stop entirely. "He looks exactly like me." Her breath hitched. The name above the message made her stomach plummet, an icy weight settling there. Alexander Monroe, Alex, the man who had once consumed her thoughts, whose charm had been intoxicating enough to make her forget caution, who had left her trembling with a mixture of desire and fear every time he looked at her with those storm-dark eyes. Her pulse raced, fingers trembling as she stared at the screen. Her mind screamed in disbelief. It had been 3 years, 3 long years, since she had run, since she had pulled herself away from a life that had been thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. She had thought distance would protect her, that the chasm between them was wide enough to bury the past and her own foolish, reckless heart. And yet here he was, or at least his words, his presence, intruding into her carefully constructed solitude. Another message came almost immediately, sharp and deliberate. "Where are you, Elena?" The simplicity of the words, the directness, made her stomach knot. There was no warmth, no hesitation, no casual inquiry, only that familiar undercurrent of ownership, of insistence, of power. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the sleeping form of her son in her arms. Leo's tiny chest rose and fell in peaceful innocence, completely unaware of the storm she was experiencing, oblivious to the man who had haunted her dreams for years, now reaching out with a single sentence. Her fingers shook as she gripped the phone tighter, tracing the name at the top of the screen. Alexander Monroe. The memory of his voice whispered in her mind, low and intoxicating, reminding her of nights she had vowed never to recall, of laughter and secrets shared in the shadowed corners of the city, of stolen kisses that had burned through the very air between them. The thrill, the danger, the forbidden, it had all been so intoxicating, and it had nearly destroyed her. Eleanor pressed her back against the wall, careful not to jostle Leo too much. Her mind raced in a frantic, looping pattern. What did he want? How did he find her? Why now, after all this time? The images came unbidden, his sharp jawline in the moonlight, the way his hands had always found hers, the undeniable magnetism that had made her knees weak despite her better judgment, and with each memory, the unease in her chest twisted tighter. Leo stirred, his tiny fingers brushing against her chin, and she whispered his name softly, almost as if saying it aloud could protect him from the realization of who was reaching out, who was looming in her past. But even as she whispered, she knew it was too late. There was no running, not anymore, not when her past had found a way to pierce through the careful walls she had built. Her eyes flicked to the window, half expecting to see a shadow, a figure standing just beyond the glass. Her heart skipped, a cold shiver running down her spine. The night outside was quiet, serene even, but inside her apartment, every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified, menacing. A flash of memory made her gasp, recalling the last time she had seen him, the heated words exchanged, the way he had looked at her as if she were the only thing that had ever mattered to him, the possessive glint in his eyes that had simultaneously terrified and captivated her. She had fled then, believing she was protecting herself, protecting her future, and now that choice loomed over her like a shadow she could no longer escape. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. Should she respond? Should she ignore it? Every instinct screamed in conflicting directions. Rational thought urged caution, fear whispered escape, and a quieter, more dangerous voice deep within her heart reminded her of what she had lost and what she still felt. Another ping. Another message, this one shorter, more pointed. I need to see him. I need to see you. Her breath caught in her throat. That need, it wasn't just a casual desire, it was sharp, insistent, a claim laid bare in digital form. She felt her pulse pound in her ears, the blood rushing in her temples as though warning her of imminent danger. Her chest tightened. Could she run fast enough? Could she hide well enough this time? Leo's small hand tugged at her necklace, and she looked down at him, heart aching with the fierce, protective love only a mother could know. She held him closer, cradling him as though her embrace could shield him from the world, from the past, from Alexander Monroe. But deep down, she knew better. Whatever had been set in motion by that accidental message could not be undone by arms, walls, or distance. Her gaze returned to the phone. Another message appeared before she could even blink. Don't hide from me. Not this time. The words were almost casual, but the undercurrent of authority and obsession ran deep, chilling her to the bone. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts, her thoughts scattering like leaves in a storm. She could feel her pulse hammering in her wrists, her temples, her chest, her entire body alert to a danger she hadn't anticipated, a danger that was also something she had once craved. A creak in the hallway made her jump. She turned her head, heart hammering, listening. The building was silent except for the occasional distant sound of traffic below, but the sudden awareness of movement made her eyes dart to the door. Had someone followed her? Was it just her imagination, or was it the first sign that the past had not only reached her digitally, but had crossed into reality? Leo let out a tiny squeal. Breaking the tense silence, Elena tightened her hold, whispering softly to calm him, but the sense of urgency refused to leave her. She had known that one day her past might catch up with her, had always feared the return of Alexander Monroe, but she had convinced herself that 3 years of careful living, careful hiding, careful routines had bought her safety. And now she realized just how fragile that safety really was. Her mind raced with scenarios. What if he came to the apartment? What if he insisted on seeing Leo immediately? What if... No, she couldn't let herself spiral further. She needed a plan, some control, anything to counter the creeping panic that threatened to consume her. And yet, With each passing second, the pull of memory, of desire, of unresolved tension made it harder to think clearly. Another vibration. Another message. Her phone seemed to hum in her hand, a siren calling her back to the storm she thought she had left behind. She glanced at the screen with trepidation, dread coiling in her stomach. Each word felt like a step closer to a confrontation she wasn't sure she could handle or resist. I see him, I see you, soon. The promise, or the threat, hung in the air. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the phone, her knuckles white. She looked down at Leo, whose eyes were starting to droop with sleep, unaware of the tension surrounding him. She whispered his name softly, almost as if the word could anchor them both, hold them safe against the approaching storm. But deep inside she knew the truth. The storm was already here, and nothing, no walls, no hiding, no careful planning, would stop it. She leaned back against the sofa, holding Leo closer, her mind spinning with fear, longing, and the undeniable pull of a past that refused to stay buried. Somewhere, in the shadows of her memory and the digital words flashing on her screen, Alexander Monroe was waiting. Waiting for her to respond, waiting for her to make a choice, waiting for her to realize that hiding might finally be impossible. And in that moment, Elena understood. The life she had built in careful solitude, the safety she had clung to for 3 years, was about to be shattered. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears as she whispered almost to herself, "What do you want from us, Alex?" And as if the universe had answered, her phone vibrated once more, a single message lighting up the dark screen, leaving her with the chilling certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. "I'm coming." Elena pressed her back against the wall, her spine meeting the cold paint, as if seeking an anchor against the storm that had erupted in her chest. Leo stirred in her arms, his small fingers curling around hers once more, clutching with the trust only a child could give. The soft weight of him seemed to momentarily ground her, yet it did little to calm the tempest of thoughts swirling relentlessly in her mind. Alexander Monroe. The name alone had become a pulse she could feel beneath her skin, a memory that had once burned like fire, now flaring back to life with cruel precision. She could hear the echo of his voice, deep and consuming, resonating in the spaces of her mind where she had thought it silent forever. The subtle cadence, the softness laced with authority, the way it had whispered her name in the quiet of the night, promising danger and desire in equal measure. And then the memory of his touch, the deliberate brush of fingers over her skin, the way his hands had memorized her contours, eliciting a shiver she had tried desperately to forget. Every recollection clawed at her composure, making her feel exposed and achingly alive all at once. "I can't," she murmured under her breath, her voice almost lost against the soft hum of the apartment's air conditioner. Her words trailed into silence, swallowed by the overwhelming pull of memories. She had fled with Leo 3 years ago, believing that distance would protect them both, believing that cutting ties would sever the chains of passion and obsession alike. Yet here he was, a ghost from the past, made tangible by a few simple words on a screen, words that brought the past crashing back into her present. Her gaze shifted to her phone, the black screen reflecting the storm inside her mind. She opened the message again. "He has my eyes." Each word cut through her chest like a knife honed on years of absence. Her heartbeat quickened, thundering against her ribs in shallow, rapid bursts that left her gasping for air she didn't know she had. Her fingers shook as she traced the words, unable to look away, unable to pretend that they were meaningless. Those words carried history, desire, possession, and a claim she had never relinquished, even as she had run. She whispered Leo's name softly, as if saying it aloud could remind her of the life she had fought to protect. The softness of his cooing answered her, a fragile counterpoint to the storm raging in her mind. The child, so small and innocent, was her tether to sanity, yet he was also a reminder of everything at risk. How could she shield him from the man whose presence, once intoxicating, had now become an unavoidable force? She had survived the past, but could she survive its resurgence? A knock at the door jolted her, sharp and insistent, slicing through the haze of memory and dread. Her pulse nearly stopped. A visitor at this hour? She wasn't expecting anyone. The sound resonated in the small apartment, echoing like a countdown, each tap a cruel metronome dictating the pace of her fear. Her mind raced, constructing every possible scenario, each more terrifying than the last. Could it be him? Was it Alex, finally stepping out of the shadows, refusing to remain a phantom confined to messages and memories? Elena clutched Leo closer, pressing his head gently against her shoulder, as if her body could shield him from the reality that had caught up to them. Her lips trembled as she whispered reassurances that she barely believed herself. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." Yet her own words rang hollow in the silence that followed. Every nerve in her body screamed warning, a siren heralding danger she couldn't ignore. The knock came again, more deliberate this time, and her stomach sank into a pit of dread. The sound carried weight, authority, intent, and she realized that whoever stood beyond the door was not asking permission. They were demanding presence. Her mind flickered to the past. The nights of fire and whispers, the reckless abandon she had once surrendered to, the moments of passion she had convinced herself would remain buried in memory. Could she confront that past now, with Leo in her arms, her heart still fragile from the years of solitude? Her phone vibrated again, a subtle reminder of the world beyond the apartment, but her attention remained on the door. Another message had appeared, impatient, insistent. "Open it! I know you're there. Don't hide." The words ignited a mixture of fear and something far more primal inside her. They were sharp, cutting, a claim wrapped in digital form yet carrying the unmistakable weight of his presence. Her chest tightened, constricting her breaths, making every inhale feel shallow and urgent. Her fingers hovered near the doorknob, trembling with the indecision that had haunted her since that accidental message. Should she answer? Could she? Each scenario played in her mind: confrontation, denial, escape. And yet, at the core, an undeniable magnetism, the same force that had drawn her to him years ago, pulled her toward the threshold. The conflict within her was exquisite and torturous, a mixture of fear, longing, and the realization that some part of her had never stopped loving him. A sudden creak from the hallway made her flinch. Her eyes darted toward the source, scanning for movement, for shadows, for proof that the universe was conspiring against her attempt to maintain control. Leo squirmed lightly, and she whispered his name again, softer this time, a lullaby meant to soothe both him and herself. But the tension refused to dissipate. It had only grown heavier, thicker, a suffocating presence that refused to be ignored. Her mind raced back to memories she had hoped to forget. The first time she had seen Alex in a crowded cafe, the way his eyes had found hers across the room, the subtle arrogance in his smile that had both infuriated and captivated her. The stolen nights, the reckless kisses, the passionate promises, they all came rushing back like a tidal wave, threatening to sweep her away despite her careful attempts at distance. And now, with Leo in her arms, she felt that same tidal wave looming, ready to consume her defenses entirely. Her heartbeat thundered against her chest as she pressed her back further into the wall. Every nerve in her body screamed with anticipation, dread, and longing. The doorknob rattled ever so slightly, as if someone had tested it without fully committing to entry. She held her breath, her pulse screaming in her ears. Could it really be him? Or was her mind playing cruel tricks, weaving the tension into a living, breathing entity that now occupied every corner of her consciousness? Another vibration, another message. Short, precise, consuming. "I've been waiting for this moment. Don't resist." Her hands tightened on her son, fingers digging into his soft skin, but the words pierced her like ice through fire. Her chest constricted, threatening to make her collapse under the weight of the past and the present, colliding in a single, inescapable moment. Elena's gaze flicked toward the window, the faint glow of the city casting long, dark shadows across the room. Every memory, every sensation, every fleeting thought of freedom seemed to vanish in the intensity of her fear. The past wasn't coming back. It had returned fully, intentionally, impossibly, and she was standing at the epicenter with no choice but to confront it. A final knock, louder, more commanding, resonated through the apartment. Her stomach lurched. She whispered Leo's name one last time, her voice trembling, fragile yet firm. She felt the heat of adrenaline surge, sharpening her senses to an almost unbearable degree. Every shadow could conceal him, every creak of the floor could herald his arrival, every second could bring confrontation. The walls she had built around herself seemed laughably fragile now. Her mind was a storm of questions, fear, and memories too potent to ignore. Could she face the man she never truly stopped loving? Could she protect Leo from the whirlwind of desire and obsession that Alex embodied? The apartment seemed impossibly small, confining, holding her in place against the inevitable confrontation that she had long feared but now could not escape. The air around her seemed to thrum with tension, each second stretching unbearably. The quiet hum of the city outside contrasted sharply with the storm inside her, the tension coiling like a living thing, pressing against her chest, her heart, her very soul. The doorknob turned slightly, a metallic whisper of inevitability. Elena's breath caught in her throat, her pulse threatening to burst. She knew, with chilling certainty, that the moment she had feared, dreamed about, and tried to avoid was finally here. Her whisper broke the silence, almost a prayer, almost a surrender. "Alex, what do you want from us?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then a shadow appeared beyond the frosted glass of the door, a figure moving with deliberate grace, and Elena's heart stuttered in a way it hadn't in years. The memory of the past, the intensity of the present, and the uncertainty of what was to come collided into one unbearable instant. She hugged Leo closer, feeling his warmth, his fragility, and whispered again, softer this time, almost to herself, "I'm ready, I think." But as the door handle clicked, signaling that the barrier between her past and present was about to vanish, she realized that nothing could have truly prepared her for what was coming next. 3. The night clung to Elena like a velvet shroud, the city lights below casting long, distorted shadows across her balcony as she rocked Leo gently in her arms. The cool air brushed against her skin, prickling and real, sharpening every sense until even the faintest sound seemed magnified. She inhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart, but the tension coiled within her like a living thing, refusing to settle. Every instinct screamed at her that danger had arrived, yet a deeper, more dangerous part of her couldn't deny the pulse of anticipation threading through her veins. Below, a sleek, black luxury car gleamed under the streetlights, its surface polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the faint glow of distant neon and the warm gold of nearby lamps. The engine was silent, yet its presence radiated power, dominance, and authority, like a predator waiting patiently in the dark. Elena's grip on Leo tightened slightly, his small body pressing closer to hers as if he too could feel the electricity that had suddenly filled the air. Her pulse thudded in her ears, loud and insistent, echoing the fear and longing she had been trying to suppress. Footsteps echoed behind her, slow and deliberate, each one a sharp note that cut through the quiet hum of the city. Her stomach lurched, and a cold wave of dread swept through her, leaving goosebumps in its wake. She froze, every muscle in her body tense, waiting for a shadow to emerge from the darkness. Then she turned, and her breath caught in her throat, lodged somewhere between fear and disbelief. Alex Monroe stood there, framed by the dim light, impossibly magnetic, impossibly alive. His presence was undeniable, a force that seemed to bend the air around him, drawing her gaze and her attention without effort. The dark storm clouds of his eyes were fixed on her, consuming yet unreadable, carrying a weight of accusation, desire, and something more primal, more dangerous than she had dared to imagine. Her knees threatened to buckle, yet she remained rooted, clutching Leo to her chest, unable to move, unable to look away. "You thought you could hide?" His voice slithered through the night, smooth yet sharp, a mixture of hunger, power, and unspoken challenge. Each word wrapped around her like a coil, squeezing and claiming in a way that made her heart ache and her pulse spike. Elena's body betrayed her instincts to flee, leaning slightly toward him despite every rational thought screaming at her to run. The air seemed to thrum with tension, charged with the dangerous magnetism that had once drawn her into his orbit. Leo wriggled in her arms, a small, innocent movement that reminded her of why she had fled all those years ago. She pressed him closer, feeling the soft weight of his head against her collarbone. Yet even as her maternal instinct urged caution, another part of her, an irrational, dangerous part, recognized the pull of desire that Alex evoked so effortlessly. His gaze swept over Leo, sharp and assessing, then returned to her, lingering with possessiveness that made her pulse race and her breath hitch. The world around them seemed to shrink, the distant sounds of traffic fading until the night existed solely for the three of them. Every nerve in her body screamed with awareness, every thought split between the need to protect Leo, the fear of the past catching up, and the undeniable magnetism of a man she had once loved too fiercely to forget. Elena realized then, with a mixture of dread and longing, that she could not outrun him. He had found them, and finding them was only the beginning. Her fingers tightened around Leo's tiny frame, knuckles whitening as a shiver ran down her spine. The balcony felt suddenly precarious, exposed, like the city itself was holding its breath alongside her. Shadows flickered across the walls behind her, cast by the faint glow of street lamps, and she imagined them shifting, hiding movement, containing secrets she could not yet see. A sudden rustle from below made her jump, and she pressed Leo closer, whispering his name as if the sound could shield them both from the man who had so effortlessly reclaimed the night. Alex stepped closer, the sound of his polished shoes on the concrete, deliberate, confident, unhurried. Each movement carried a grace that was almost predatory, a confidence that reminded Elena of why she had fallen into the intensity of his world despite the danger it represented. His eyes never left hers, dark and unreadable, yet with an undercurrent of something dangerously intimate. He was a storm contained in human form, and she felt herself drawn into the center of it even as her instincts screamed for flight. "Leo," he murmured softly, almost reverently, his gaze fixed on the small boy in her arms. There was a gentleness there that conflicted with the possessive hunger in his expression, a duality that made Elena's chest tighten in ways she had long forgotten. Her fingers flexed slightly, feeling the small pulse of life against her skin, aware that he was the tether holding her to the present, the fragile shield against the intensity of the man standing before them. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, each second a taut wire vibrating with anticipation and unspoken tension. Elena's mind raced, a whirlwind of questions and fears that collided with memories too vivid to ignore. The stolen kisses, the reckless nights, the whispered promises that had left her trembling yet craving more. Could she face him now without losing herself entirely? Could she protect Leo while acknowledging the pull she had never truly escaped? Another movement from Alex drew her eyes, subtle yet deliberate, a step closer that erased the space between caution and danger. Every instinct within her screamed a warning, yet the familiarity, the history, the undeniable connection between them made resistance almost impossible. She felt her body betray her again, leaning slightly toward him despite the walls she had built around her heart. 3 years, he said, voice low, measured, almost a growl. 3 years, and you still run. Do you think distance changes anything? The words wrapped around her, insistent, claiming, and though part of her wanted to deny it, another part, the part that had never stopped feeling, knew they were true. She had run, yes, but she had also carried him inside her, in the shadowed corners of her heart, in the memory of nights that had burned into her soul. Leo stirred again, tiny arms reaching toward Alex, and she stiffened, caught between fear and awe. Alex's expression softened imperceptibly as he looked down at him, a flicker of tenderness in his dark eyes, the same eyes that had once left her breathless with longing. It was a paradox, danger and care intertwined, desire and obsession coexisting in a single glance. She realized with a shiver that the man before her had not changed, and yet everything had changed. A soft rustle came from the hallway behind her, a sound so faint it might have been imagined, and her heart leapt into her throat. Shadows seemed to stretch and move, as though aware of the presence standing so confidently below. The city noises, the distant sirens, the hum of cars, faded, leaving only the sound of her pulse, the quiet breathing of Leo, and the deliberate steps of a man she had long tried to forget. Her own breaths came in shallow, urgent bursts, echoing in the small balcony space. She could feel her pulse in her throat, her temples, her fingers, as she held Leo tightly, the world narrowing to the tension between herself and Alex. Desire and danger danced together, inseparable, a storm contained in the quiet night, and she felt herself pulled toward it, despite every rational thought urging her to retreat. "Do you know how long I've looked for him? For you?" Alex murmured, voice low, dangerous, and impossibly intimate. His presence was magnetic, commanding, and she felt the walls she had built crumble under the weight of his gaze. Each word, each motion, each subtle shift of his stance reminded her that this was no longer about the past. They were here, now, in a confrontation that would reshape everything she thought she had controlled. The night seemed to hold its breath alongside her, the city below oblivious to the tension crackling above it. Elena's mind whirled, a storm of fear, desire, and uncertainty, yet amidst it all, one truth crystallized with undeniable clarity. She could not hide, she could not escape. Alex had found them, and he was here, and whatever was about to unfold, it would change everything. A sudden movement, a hand reaching toward the railing, a shadow stretching in the corner of her vision, made her flinch. Her instincts screamed, yet the pull, the dangerous pull she had never truly resisted, held her in place. Leo stirred again, tiny fingers brushing her cheek, grounding her in the fragile present as Alex's eyes locked onto hers, unwavering, claiming, intense. "You can't run anymore," he whispered, voice like velvet laced with steel. "Not from me, not from him, not from what we were, and what we still are." Elena's breath caught, her pulse hammering as the truth of his words settled over her like fire. The storm of the past had arrived in the present, and there was no turning back. The night had shifted, transformed, and in that instant she understood with unshakable certainty she had been found. And in that realization, fear, longing, and desire coalesced into one undeniable truth. Her life, her son, and her heart would never be the same again. 4. The night air felt heavier now, dense with anticipation, as Alex stepped closer on the balcony, closing the distance that had stretched between them. His presence was magnetic, overwhelming, the kind of force that left Elena both trembling and rooted in place. She pressed Leo closer to her chest, feeling his warmth, his heartbeat, the fragile weight of him grounding her. Yet her mind spun uncontrollably. Each step he took echoed against the concrete, deliberate and commanding, as though the very rhythm of the night belonged to him. A stray strand of her hair caught the wind, brushing her cheek. Alex reached out with a slow, deliberate motion, brushing it away with his fingers. The touch, casual to anyone else, sent shivers down her spine, igniting a fire in her veins she hadn't felt in years. Her pulse raced, every nerve alive, a combination of fear, longing, and the memory of nights that had burned themselves into her memory. His gaze held hers, dark, unreadable, yet intimately familiar, a storm barely restrained behind a mask of control. "I've been looking for him. And for you," he murmured, voice low, intimate, each word wrapped in an intensity that made her knees weak despite her determination to remain strong. The sound of his words stirred memories she had fought to bury, memories that came rushing back like a tidal wave threatening to pull her under. She remembered stolen kisses in the rain, hands exploring with reckless abandon, whispered promises that had left her breathless and trembling, nights of passion that had seared themselves into her skin. Her chest tightened as those memories collided with the present. She had fled, believing distance and caution would protect Leo and herself. Yet here he was, a living reminder that the past had never truly let go. Her body betrayed her, leaning slightly forward despite the fear coiling in her stomach. She felt the tug of desire, that magnetic pull that had drawn her to him years ago, even as her mind screamed for reason. She whispered Leo's name, almost as if saying it aloud could anchor them both, yet even the word could not dispel the tension that had wrapped itself around her heart. "You can't take him from me," she murmured, voice trembling, fragile yet defiant. Her words hung in the night, a challenge and a plea all at once, exposing her vulnerability and the depth of the bond she had forged with her son. Alex's gaze flicked to Leo, assessing, protective, and yet there was no malice in his eyes, only a possessive intensity that made Elena shiver in ways she could neither control nor deny. Alex's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile, the kind that had once made her knees weaken and her pulse accelerate with both fear and desire. It was a smile that spoke of power, obsession, and a longing that had never truly faded. "I don't intend to ask," he said, voice low, commanding, as if the world had shrunk to the three of them and nothing else mattered. The words carried a claim, a declaration that was both threatening and intimate, leaving Eleanor's heart caught between terror and the forbidden allure she had once surrendered to. The air between them thickened, charged with tension, almost tangible, as though the night itself had paused to witness the collision of past and present. Each second stretched endlessly, the space between breaths filled with the unsaid, with desire, with fear, with memories that refused to stay buried. Shadows seemed to creep along the balcony walls, closing in around them, echoing the intensity of the emotions that tangled in Elena's chest. Her fingers tightened around Leo, feeling the fragile life in her arms, and she realized that she could not, would not, allow him to be hurt. Yet her resolve was fragile. Alex's presence was suffocating, intoxicating, demanding a surrender she wasn't sure she could resist. The memories of passion, of nights spent in reckless abandon, tugged at her heart, whispering that some part of her had never stopped yearning, never stopped wanting him. The night seemed to hum around them, each sound, distant traffic, the faint hum of streetlights, the whisper of wind, amplified by the tension that coiled like a living thing. Elena's chest rose and fell rapidly, breaths shallow and uneven as she struggled to reconcile the past with the present. She could feel Alex's gaze on her, scanning, assessing, and it made her pulse stutter in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Alex took another step closer, closing the remaining distance, and Elena felt the pull of his presence like gravity. Her mind raced with scenarios, fears, and forbidden desires. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself even a moment of vulnerability? The child in her arms demanded caution, yet every fiber of her being was drawn toward the man who had claimed her heart years ago, the man who now stood before her as a force impossible to resist. "Do you remember?" Alex whispered, voice thick with memory, with longing. "Do you remember what it felt like to be with me? To surrender? To let yourself feel everything?" His words were both a question and a statement, a reminder of nights that had left her body and soul scorched with intensity, a past she had tried desperately to escape, yet carried in every pulse, every heartbeat. Elena's stomach lurched as the memories surged, vivid and unrelenting. She remembered the feel of his hands on her skin, the way he had claimed her with a possessiveness that had terrified her, the passion that had consumed her, leaving her trembling and breathless. Every recollection made her chest tighten, every thought a collision of fear and desire. She pressed Leo closer, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself, grounding herself in the present even as the past surged around her like a tidal wave. Alex's expression softened for the briefest of moments as he looked down at Leo, his eyes carrying a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the possessive hunger in his gaze directed at her. The duality was intoxicating, confusing, impossible to ignore. Elena realized that the man before her embodied every part of her memory of him. The danger, the obsession, the tenderness, the desire, all wrapped in a single, undeniable presence. The night held its breath, the city below unaware of the tension on the small balcony. Elena felt the weight of history pressing down on her, the past and present colliding with a force that left her reeling. She could not escape, could not deny the pull, yet she fought, her instincts screaming to protect Leo, to preserve what little stability they had carved out in 3 years. A soft rustle behind her, the faintest whisper of movement, made her heart skip. Shadows seemed to twist and lengthen, and her pulse raced as if warning her that the past was no longer content to stay contained. Every instinct screamed caution, yet the magnetic pull of Alex was impossible to resist. She could feel her defenses weakening, memory and desire entangling with fear in ways she had not anticipated. Alex reached out, his hand brushing hers almost accidentally, yet it carried the weight of inevitability. A shiver ran through her body, and she realized with a pang that she had never truly stopped yearning for this connection, for the danger, for the fire that had defined their history. His voice cut through the tension once more, low and commanding. "Elena, you're mine, always have been, always will be." Her breath caught, shallow and trembling. Shadows pressed closer along the balcony walls, a reflection of the storm of emotions constricting her chest. She clutched Leo, whispering his name, grounding herself in the only reality she could fully control. Yet even as she whispered, she knew. Her past had returned, claiming what it had never truly relinquished, every second stretched, thick with possibility and threat. Elena's mind reeled with fear, longing, and a dangerous recognition that some part of her had been waiting for this moment without realizing it. The night was alive with tension, with desire, with the undeniable force of a man who had returned to rewrite every rule she had built for herself. A sudden gust of wind swept across the balcony, tousling her hair, carrying with it the scent of the city and something more, something primal and consuming that made her heart hammer. She pressed Leo closer, yet even as her maternal instinct screamed caution, a part of her body leaned toward him, drawn to the impossible magnetism of Alex Monroe. "I won't ask for permission," he murmured again, voice low and dangerous. "I take what's mine." Her chest constricted, breath hitching. The past, the present, and the undeniable pull of desire collided with a force she could not resist. Shadows stretched. The night thrummed with anticipation, and Elena realized with chilling clarity that the storm she had fled from 3 years ago had returned, fully, intentionally, irrevocably. Her heart pounded as she whispered, almost inaudibly, I can't. Alex's lips curved into that dangerous magnetic smile, the one that promised fire and chaos, and she felt herself teetering on the edge between fear and desire. The night, the shadows, the air between them seemed to pulse with the inevitability of what was coming. She knew in that suspended, breathless moment that nothing, no walls, no distance, no careful solitude, could stop the force that had returned to claim her. And in that instant, Eleanor understood a truth she could no longer deny. Her past had returned, fully alive, fully dangerous, and entirely impossible to resist. The days that followed Alex's reappearance blurred into a tense, unrelenting rhythm. Elena moved through her life with a fragile sense of normalcy, yet every corner of her world had been infiltrated, invaded by the man she had once thought was a memory. At first, she convinced herself it was coincidence, an impossible string of chance encounters. But the sharp pang of recognition in her chest, the flicker of heat behind her collarbones every time she glimpsed him, left no room for denial. Alex's presence became omnipresent, unavoidable, as if fate itself had aligned to place him in her path at every turn. Outside the daycare, she caught a shadow watching her through the trees, an impossible familiarity in the way the figure leaned casually against a lamppost. She froze, gripping Leo tighter, heart hammering as she recognized the subtle tilt of his head, the confident stillness that had once captivated and terrified her in equal measure. Her stomach lurched, a mixture of fear and something deeper, a desire she had spent years denying. She took a shaky breath and whispered Leo's name, grounding herself, hoping he wouldn't feel the tremor of her panic, the awareness that Alex had found them again. Near her office, she noticed a black car lingering just beyond the streetlight's glow, its engine silent yet commanding attention. Her pulse surged, a cold knot tightening in her chest, as her instincts screamed that it wasn't a coincidence. Her mind raced, constructing 1,000 possibilities. Was he here to threaten her, to claim what he believed was his, or was it a game, a dangerous, intimate game only he could play with such precision? She swallowed hard, feeling Leo stir in her, arms, tiny fingers brushing against her neck as if sensing her unease. Every step she took was haunted by the awareness of him. She felt his eyes before she saw him, a presence so acute it could not be ignored. Her walls, strong, fortified, built over years of careful solitude, began to crumble under the weight of inevitability. Each encounter, each glimpse of those stormy eyes, stripped away her resolve layer by fragile layer. She had built these walls to protect Leo, to protect herself. But Alex's return made them feel absurdly fragile, laughably inadequate against a force she could neither predict nor resist. One night, drawn by a mixture of dread and curiosity, Elena ascended to the rooftop of her apartment building, seeking solitude, seeking perspective, seeking to breathe in air untainted by the weight of the past. The city stretched below, a lattice of lights and muted sounds, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine safety, distance, control. Leo lay asleep in her arms, the small, steady rhythm of his breathing a grounding presence in the midst of her chaos. She closed her eyes briefly, attempting to shut out the past, to summon calm, only to hear the subtle, unmistakable sound of footsteps. Her eyes snapped open. There he was, Alex, leaning casually against the railing, eyes locked on her with a focus that left her breathless. The night air seemed to thrum with his presence, each detail of him sharpened by the glow of distant streetlights, the curve of his shoulders, the set of his jaw, the storm behind his eyes. His gaze swept over Leo and returned to her, unwavering, possessive, undeniable. Her heart faltered as memories surfaced unbidden. Nights spent tangled in his arms, the way he had claimed her with a touch, a look, a word. He's mine, he said softly, his voice steady, unwavering, as if the world itself had conspired to echo his declaration. His words carried weight, authority, and a hunger that pressed against her chest. Elena's pulse spiked, a mixture of fear and something far more dangerous stirring within her. Resistance, she realized, seemed futile. Every glance he cast, every subtle movement, every fraction of a breath drew her closer, eroding her careful control. The walls she had built around her heart trembled under the magnetic pull of his presence. Her body betrayed her in the smallest ways, the way her fingers unconsciously tightened around Leo's blanket, the shallow catch of her breath, the subtle leaning forward that even she could not explain. Desire and danger mingled in a potent, intoxicating dance she had long tried to avoid. The air between them seemed to thicken with each second, charged with the history they shared, with unspoken longing, with the irresistible tension that neither distance nor time had diminished. She tried to speak, to reclaim some fragment of control, yet the words faltered on her lips. "Alex, why are you here?" Her voice was a mixture of accusation and plea, tremulous yet firm, a reflection of the war raging within her. His expression remained unreadable, yet there was no doubt in his eyes, no hesitation in his posture. The man before her was entirely certain, entirely unyielding, and entirely magnetic. "I've been waiting," he replied, voice low, measured, carrying the weight of obsession and something far more intimate. "Waiting for the moment I could find you both. Waiting for you to realize that no matter how far you ran, no matter how high you built these walls, you couldn't escape me." Each word landed like a deliberate strike, shaking the foundation of the life she had meticulously constructed. Her chest constricted, breaths shallow, heart pounding in a rhythm she could not control. Elena pressed Leo closer, as if the small weight of him could anchor her against the storm of emotions coursing through her body. Yet she felt the pull, the undeniable magnetic draw toward Alex, and she knew that her resolve was already faltering. Each movement he made, subtle yet deliberate, chipped away at the barriers she had built with such care. She wondered, not for the first time, whether she could ever be free of him, whether freedom was ever truly hers to claim. A gust of wind swept across the rooftop, carrying the scent of rain and city streets, swirling around them, entwining them in a moment suspended between desire and danger. The city below seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, the soft weight of Leo in her arms, and the charged, magnetic tension that drew her forward, even as fear anchored her in place. Every instinct screamed for caution, yet every memory, every whisper of the past tugged her closer. He stepped closer still, deliberately closing the remaining distance. Elena felt her pulse hammering, her chest constricted, and yet the ache in her heart, the stirrings of desire she had thought long extinguished, flared anew. Resistance felt impossible. Each subtle motion he made, a tilt of his head, a shift of his stance, the faint curve of his lips, carried weight, authority, and an allure that left her both terrified and captivated. "You can't hide from me," he murmured, voice low, a growl that resonated with the promise of possession and protection alike. "Not from him, not from what we had, not from what we still are." His eyes locked on hers, dark and intense, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of surrender, the world narrowing to the three of them, to the tiny heartbeat in her arms, to the storm in his gaze. Elena's mind raced, a tempest of fear, longing, and dangerous recognition. Every safe space she had known felt invaded, every routine compromised. He was everywhere. Outside the daycare, lingering near her office, in the city streets, now here on her rooftop, unrelenting and inevitable. Each encounter, each glance, eroded her defenses, leaving her heart vulnerable, her body betraying her with every instinctual shiver and tremor. She whispered Leo's name softly, grounding herself, yet even as she did, she felt the walls of her heart crumble further. The realization hit her with sharp clarity. Alex had made himself unavoidable. Her choices, her solitude, her careful planning, all had been meaningless in the face of his relentless presence. And as he took another step, moving with the dangerous magnetic confidence that had once consumed her nights, she knew that the question she had long avoided had become unavoidable. Could she trust him again, or was she already lost? Her breath caught in her throat as he leaned slightly closer, the intensity of his gaze locking hers in a gravitational pull she could not escape. The night seemed to thrum around them, a living entity that pulsed with the tension, the history, and the dangerous intimacy between them. She felt the brush of air as he shifted, a subtle, deliberate motion, yet it carried the weight of years, of longing, of obsession. Every heartbeat was magnified, every shadow seemed alive, and Elena realized she was standing on the edge of a precipice. Her walls, once so carefully constructed, had begun to crumble under the weight of inevitability, of desire, and of the unrelenting force of a man who refused to be ignored. And in that moment, with Leo sleeping peacefully in her arms, the night charged with tension, and Alex closer than ever before, she understood a terrifying, undeniable truth. She might never be free. The question lingered in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. Could she trust him again, or was she already lost to the storm he had brought back into her life? 6. The night had grown heavier, thick with the promise of storm clouds and electricity, mirroring the tumult within Elena's chest. She stood on the balcony, Leo cradled close, feeling the rhythm of his small heartbeat against her chest, each thump grounding her in the present, even as every nerve screamed the pull of the past. Alex remained a shadow beside her, a figure impossible to ignore, magnetic and predatory, yet tempered by tenderness. Every glance he cast, every subtle shift of his body, seemed choreographed to unravel her resolve without a single word. He leaned closer, the scent of him, warm, intoxicating, familiar, filling her senses. Memories of stolen nights, of hands exploring skin with a reckless urgency, surged unbidden through her mind. Her chest tightened, breaths coming in shallow bursts, the weight of emotion pressing her back against the balcony railing. "I'll never let you go," Alex whispered, his voice low, deliberate, a promise carrying both danger and devotion. The words wrapped around her, constricting, electrifying, leaving no space for reason or caution. Elena's body betrayed her, leaning toward him despite the rational part of her mind screaming to resist. She felt the fire rekindle in her veins, a slow burn that pulsed with every heartbeat. Every memory of him, the danger, the thrill, the passion that had once consumed her nights, returned in vivid clarity, intensifying the tension that coiled tightly around her chest. Leo stirred slightly, a tiny whimper escaping, and Alex's hands moved instinctively, gentle yet possessive, cradling the boy with a tenderness that made her heart ache, with an ache that was both painful and sweet. The city below flickered with scattered lights, neon reflections dancing across glass and metal, painting the night in shifting patterns that seemed to mimic the turbulence inside her. She felt the juxtaposition of danger and desire in Alex's presence, a combination that had defined their past, leaving her simultaneously terrified and entranced. Every subtle gesture, the tilt of his head, the weight of his gaze, the brush of his fingers along hers, spoke of history, of unspoken promises, of a bond that had never truly been severed. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, the air thick with the scent of rain approaching and the electric pull between them. You can't just be here," she murmured, voice trembling, attempting to create a barrier she could no longer maintain. Yet even as the words left her lips, she knew they were futile. Resistance had become an exercise in futility, each moment with him eroding her defenses further, pulling her into a dangerous intimacy she could not escape. Alex's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile, dark and magnetic, a reflection of the storm raging in his eyes. "I don't want to just be here," he said, voice low, deliberate, caressing her ear like silk. "I want to stay, I want to protect you, and I want you." The intensity of his gaze pinned her in place, and Elena felt the rush of memories, the nights spent in reckless passion, the whispered confessions under moonlight, the stolen moments of vulnerability that had left her both breathless and longing. Her fingers instinctively tightened around Leo's small body, grounding herself, yet even this simple gesture could not shield her from the tidal wave of desire and fear coiling in her veins. The duality of Alex, the predator and the protector, made her pulse surge uncontrollably, her mind spinning with the realization that she had never stopped wanting him. Her resolve, painstakingly built over years of solitude, began to crumble under the weight of his presence. A soft gust of wind carried the scent of the approaching storm, tousling her hair, wrapping around them, binding them in a moment suspended between the past and the present. She felt the heat of his body beside hers, the subtle brush of his hand against her arm, the intensity of his eyes that seemed to strip away every layer of pretense she had constructed. Every nerve in her body sang with awareness, each movement charged with an electricity that left her breathless and trembling. "Do you feel it too?" he asked, voice low, his lips barely moving as his gaze sought hers with unwavering intent. "The pull, the fire between us. It never really died, did it?" Eleanor's throat constricted, unable to respond, yet her body betrayed her in every subtle lean, every shiver, every stolen glance she allowed herself to meet his. The air between them was alive, charged with unspoken promises and dangerous potential, as if the night itself was holding its breath in anticipation. Leo stirred again, tiny fingers curling around her blouse, and Alex instinctively moved to cradle him closer, careful, gentle, yet with an undeniable possessiveness. Elena's heart ached at the sight. The duality of him, capable of both tenderness and raw intensity, leaving her torn between fear and a longing that was impossible to suppress. She could feel the weight of his presence, the pull of his desire, and the dangerous allure that had once defined their every encounter. The balcony seemed to shrink around them, the city below fading into insignificance. As the night focused entirely on the three of them, Elena's pulse raced, chest tightening, as memories of fire and danger surged alongside a profound yearning she could no longer deny. She whispered Leo's name softly, grounding herself, yet even as she did, the magnetic force of Alex's gaze held her hostage. Resistance felt futile, yet the tiniest ember of caution still burned within her. Her breath hitched as Alex's hand brushed hers, a movement so subtle yet deliberate that it left her trembling. The contact carried years of unspoken desire, of passion restrained, of longing that had never been extinguished. She felt her body respond, despite every rational thought, each nerve ending igniting in warning and anticipation. The night wrapped around them like a living entity, pulsing with the heat and intensity that crackled between them. Suddenly, a rustle in the shadows made her pulse spike. Her head snapped toward the noise, heart hammering as tension shot through her veins like electricity. Someone, or something, was watching. Alex's gaze shifted slightly, alert, protective, and the possessive edge in his stance deepened. "Stay behind me," he murmured, voice low, commanding, and Elena felt a mixture of relief and fear, the realization that danger lurked nearby and that he was ready to protect them at any cost. She swallowed hard, grounding herself in the warmth of his body behind her, the protective weight of his presence, and the tiny, peaceful rhythm of Leo's breathing. Yet even as she felt temporary safety, the awareness of unseen eyes sent a shiver racing down her spine. Every instinct screamed caution, every memory screamed desire, and every heartbeat tied her further into the dangerous tension that surrounded them. Alex's fingers brushed her cheek lightly, as if reading her thoughts, sensing the mixture of fear and desire twisting within her. "Nothing will harm you," he whispered, voice low, deliberate, possessive. "I'll burn the world down before I let anything happen to you." To him. The weight of his promise pressed against her chest, making her pulse race faster. The tension between them thick, almost tangible. Eleanor's chest heaved as she absorbed his words, feeling the magnetic force of his presence, the undeniable pull of their shared history, and the dangerous allure that had never faded. Every subtle motion he made, leaning slightly closer, shifting to shield her from the shadows, brushing his thumb across her skin, ignited embers long thought extinguished. She realized with a jolt that she wanted him here, now, despite the warning bells blaring in her mind. The night seemed alive around them, charged with tension, desire, and the thrill of the unknown. Elena pressed Leo closer, whispering a quiet reassurance, but her gaze could not leave Alex's. His eyes held storms of longing, danger, and obsession, and she felt herself being pulled into their gravity, teetering on the edge of surrender. The shadows stretched along the balcony walls, alive with the possibility of unseen threats, yet more alive with the fire that ignited whenever he was near. A sudden gust of wind swept past, tousling their hair and carrying with it the scent of the city and something more primal, more consuming. Elena shivered, not from cold, but from the awareness that the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm building within the space between them. Every nerve ending sang with electricity, every heartbeat a warning and an invitation. She leaned back slightly, attempting to regain composure, yet the pull of his gaze, the warmth of his hand, and the dangerous intimacy between them made it impossible. Desire and fear danced together in a potent, intoxicating rhythm, leaving her both terrified and captivated. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, every sound amplified, every shadow menacing, yet each moment alive with possibility. Leo stirred once more, tiny fingers brushing Alex's hand, a silent connection forming, sealing a bond that even time and distance could not break. Elena's chest constricted, awareness of their vulnerability heightened, yet the warmth and protective presence of Alex beside her offered a paradoxical comfort. She realized that she was standing on the precipice between caution and surrender, between fear and desire, and that the choice was already slipping from her grasp. Her voice came out in a whisper almost unintelligible, yet charged with emotion. "Alex, She faltered, unsure of what she could admit, yet incapable of denying the truth burning through her veins. His hand tilted her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his, and she felt the world narrow to the three of them. The child, the man, and the electric tension that tied them together. "Shh," he murmured, voice low, caressing the air between them. "I've got you, both of you, and I'm not letting go." Every word pressed against her chest, igniting desire, fear, and the deep, unshakable realization that he was entirely unavoidable. Shadows shifted along the balcony walls, the city lights flickered in rhythm with the storm, and Elena felt herself teetering on the edge of surrender. Then a sudden, soft creak echoed from the balcony door, pulling her attention to the shadows once more. Her pulse spiked, fear sharp and immediate, as the realization hit someone, or something, was watching. She tensed, instinctively pressing Leo closer, while Alex's hands moved to shield them both, eyes scanning the darkness with a predatory focus. The night was alive, charged with danger and desire, and Elena understood in that suspended moment that nothing, not distance, not walls, not time, could protect her from the storm that had returned. Every heartbeat spoke of tension, fear, and love entwined. Every breath was a mixture of longing and caution. And Elena realized with a shiver that ran to her very core that the night had only just begun. The fire between them was impossible to extinguish, the danger in the shadows unavoidable, and the desire, raw, consuming, undeniable, had returned in full force. The morning after the balcony encounter was heavy with unease. Elena moved through the apartment with a nervous rhythm. Leo clutched safely against her chest, his soft coos and tiny yawns a fragile comfort against the storm she sensed lurking beyond the walls. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every reflection in the glass, a habit born from years of running and hiding. She knew instinctively that danger often wore familiar faces, or left traces so subtle she could only feel them. The city seemed deceptively calm, but Elena's gut screamed that peace was never real, while Alex's world and the past they shared lingered so close. Her phone vibrated sharply, slicing through the tenuous quiet. She froze, a chill crawling down her spine. The daycare's name flashed on the screen, her stomach knotting. A frantic voice, shaking and urgent, reached her ears before she even answered. "Miss Elena, your son, he's gone. He was taken for a moment. We found him, but—" The words tumbled out incoherently, frantic and panicked. Leo stirred, sensing her tension, and she pressed him tighter, her breath hitching, chest constricting. Every worst-case scenario played across her mind in rapid succession, heart hammering in her ears. Before she could react further, the sound of shattering glass or a slammed door, she couldn't tell which, echoed from the balcony. Her head whipped in the direction instinct dictated, and there he was, Alex, a shadow against the morning light, storm incarnate, the magnetic energy of fury radiating from him like heat. His gaze locked on her with an intensity that made her knees weak, every instinct screaming both fear and relief. "No one touches what's mine," he growled, voice low, dangerous, resonating with possessiveness that sent shivers down her spine. Elena barely had time to breathe before his presence consumed the space between them. He moved like a predator, every step deliberate, calculated, terrifying in its precision. Her heart thudded against her ribs as memories of past nights of danger and desire collided in her mind, nights when he had been both her shield and her storm. And now, facing him in the aftermath of a threat to Leo, she understood more vividly than ever how much of their lives depended on him, on his ability to protect, on the force of him that she had never truly measured until now. The city beyond the balcony seemed to shrink under his gaze. Vehicles moved sluggishly in the morning haze, streetlights flickered, pedestrians hurried along, unaware of the storm brewing above them. Yet Elena's entire world had condensed into one taut moment, one sharp slice of reality where only Alex, Leo, and she existed. His hands, strong and commanding, held her son with a tenderness that juxtaposed the dangerous fire in his eyes. She felt awe prick at her chest, tinged with fear, realizing the extent of his control, the magnitude of his protective instincts. A subtle noise from below, a door closing, the shuffle of hurried feet made her pulse spike. Alex's head snapped toward the sound, muscles tensing, every movement precise, fluid, predator-like. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his voice low, not raising in volume, yet carrying an authority that left no room for debate. Elena complied, pressing Leo closer as her gaze darted across the balcony, noting the faint movement of shadows and shapes that made her throat tighten. Danger was near, and though she did not yet see it, she felt it. Alex shifted, blocking her view from the edge with his imposing stance. His eyes were sharp, calculating, scanning for threat and opportunity alike. The morning light hit his features at just the right angle to illuminate the set of his jaw, the dark storm swirling in his irises, and Elena's breath hitched involuntarily. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had never doubted his ability to control his world, a predator in human form, and yet each movement carried the subtlest undercurrent of care for her and their son. She swallowed hard, heart hammering, as Alex's hand brushed her arm in the most subtle of touches, a gesture simultaneously grounding and igniting a fire in her chest. "He's safe," Alex murmured, voice low, almost a whisper, yet it vibrated with authority and promise. "I'll never let anything happen to him, or you." Elena felt the words reverberate deep within her, warming her despite the lingering chill of fear. She wanted to argue, to protest, to reclaim some fragment of control, but her body and mind both betrayed her. Outside the balcony, a figure stirred, barely perceptible in the shifting shadows of the street below. Eleanor's gaze flicked toward it, pulse racing, breath hitching in synchrony with Leo's tiny movements against her chest. Alex followed her eyes instantly, muscles coiling like a spring ready to snap. His reaction was immediate, the ferocity in his stance a palpable shield between them, and the threat he sensed, but had not yet fully identified. Every instinct she had ever known screamed that he was both their protector and a force she could never match or escape. He moved with silent precision, every step measured, every motion controlled, yet effortlessly powerful. Elena could see his mind working even in the subtle tilt of his head, the narrowed focus of his stormy eyes, the slight tightening of his jaw. Danger was near, but he had anticipated it, positioned himself, prepared for every eventuality. She realized with awe and an undeniable shiver that Alex was more than a lover. He was a force of nature, a storm impossible to resist, impossible to fight. Leo stirred again, and Alex adjusted him in his arms, gentle now, possessive always. Elena felt her chest constrict at the tenderness, the paradoxical combination of fire and care, danger and love. She whispered his name softly, grounding herself, trying to summon calm, but even as she did, her mind raced through every possible scenario of threat. What had prompted the frantic call from the daycare? Was someone watching, following, observing them with intent? Alex's eyes scanned the surrounding area, gaze sharp as a blade, unyielding, unwavering. The air seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation and latent danger. Elena pressed herself against him subconsciously, both seeking protection and experiencing a thrill that made her pulse race. Her body betrayed her caution once more, drawn to the very man whose presence both terrified and captivated her. Time became elastic, stretched thin between the chaos of fear and the intimacy of proximity. Every shift of Alex's stance, every subtle movement of his hands spoke volumes to Elena, conveying both promise and warning. She understood now what it meant to be in the orbit of a man who would bend the world to shield those he loved, a man for whom no obstacle was insurmountable if it threatened his domain. Her eyes flicked to the balcony door, hesitant, heart racing, imagining the possibility that danger had already breached another threshold. Alex followed her gaze, body responding before thought could intervene, a storm contained yet coiled with the capacity for explosive protection. Elena felt herself teetering on a knife's edge between fear and relief, terror and longing. Minutes or hours passed in tense stillness, the city below oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding above. The figure in the shadows had vanished, or perhaps merged with the urban background. Yet the threat lingered in Elena's chest, a tight, pulsing awareness she could not dismiss. Alex remained still beside her, storm in human form, each breath controlled, each heartbeat in sync with hers, as if tethered invisibly to hers and Leo's. Then, as if responding to an unseen command, Alex shifted slightly, his head turning sharply to the faintest sound, the rustle of leaves, a step on concrete, a whisper carried by the wind. Elena's pulse spiked, tiny Leo gripping her blouse tighter, sensing tension, reacting to the charged energy she could barely articulate. He growled softly under his breath, low and warning, a sound that carried authority and a threat directed at someone she could not see. Her throat tightened, the realization that danger existed outside her control, pressing down with weight. Yet within the circle of Alex's presence, a paradoxical safety existed. Impossible, fierce, absolute. Minutes later, or maybe only seconds, he returned his focus to her, eyes softening just slightly, gaze lingering on hers, and Eleanor felt the paradox of terror and desire, protection and heat wrap around her chest. No one will ever harm you or him, he said again, voice low, carrying a weight beyond reasoning. I will make sure of it. Elena pressed Leo closer, whispering his name as a quiet prayer to herself, grounding in the warmth of Alex's arms, yet aware that threats, seen and unseen, still lingered. The realization settled deep in her chest. The world outside might be dangerous. Shadows might watch, and unseen eyes might track them, but only Alex had the power to truly keep them safe. Even as fear pulsed through her veins, a shiver of awe and respect ran alongside it. She realized she had placed everything in his hands, her life, her son, her heart, and for the first time in years she understood fully the price and depth of that trust. The city around them seemed small, insignificant under his presence, and Elena knew that from this day forward there would be no running, no hiding, no distance capable of separating them from the storm Alex represented. Her pulse throbbed, breath caught in her throat, and tiny Leo stirred again, a gentle reminder of what and who she was protecting. She whispered his name softly, pressing him against her chest as Alex's hand brushed hers, grounding, fierce, protective. Then, as if testing their fragile moment of calm, a sudden sound from the street below, a muffled shout, the scrape of metal, a door banging, made her pulse spike, breath hitch, and her heart leap into her throat. Danger had not yet left them. Someone or something was still out there, watching, waiting, threatening. Elena glanced at Alex, who moved instantly, a coiled storm ready to strike. His eyes met hers, stormy and unreadable, and she felt the tension spike between them, her heart racing with a mixture of fear, awe, and an undeniable recognition. Only he could protect them from the darkness looming beyond. Only he could contain the threat in the shadows. Only he could ensure their survival. And in that moment, with Leo in her arms, Alex at her side, the city unaware and the shadows stirring, Elena realized her life, her son, and her heart were entirely in the hands of the man who was more than a lover, more than a force, more than anyone she had ever known.